At precisely 4:17, about 312 miles off the Venezuelan coast, a 53-year-old German submarine produced one of the quietest sounds the ocean can carry. A soft hydraulic murmur as its torpedo tube doors began to open. Inside the Sabalo, 64 Venezuelan sailors believed they were moments away from shaping history. What they didn't realize was that this moment had already been anticipated 6 days earlier in Norfolk, where analysts had predicted it before the submarine even left port. On the horizon sat a vessel that looked less like a ship and more like a floating city, the USS Gerald R. Ford. Nearly 100,000 tons of American naval strength, 75 aircraft, a crew of roughly 4,500, a construction cost around $13 billion. To the Venezuelan captain, the carrier represented a powerful political symbol. To the 3 Virginia-class submarine quietly trailing him from 2,000 yards away, it was simply a problem with a very predictable outcome. The real story begins long before this moment. Venezuela's submarine force didn't disappear overnight. It declined gradually, the way fruit spoils when left too long in the sun. In 1976, during an era when oil wealth could fund ambitious military projects, Venezuela purchased 4 German-built Type 209 submarines. At the time, it signaled serious naval ambitions. The country maintained a fleet that commanded respect throughout the Caribbean. Today, the situation looks very different. 3 of those submarines remain at La Guaira Naval Base, stripped for spare parts. Metal frames picked apart by technicians trying to keep at least one vessel operational. One boat hasn't moved since 2014. Another lost its propeller shaft in 2017. A third no longer even has a functioning combat information center. Among sailors, a common joke circulates. If you combine the usable components from all 4 submarines, you might get enough equipment to assemble 1.5 working vessels. The Sabalo is the lone survivor, and even that description is generous. Its diesel engines haven't received a full overhaul in nearly 9 years. The sonar system relies on vacuum tube electronics that were already outdated decades ago. The fire control computer runs software designed long before modern smartphones existed. Venezuelan naval crews haven't conducted a live torpedo launch exercise in more than 10 years. Not because they lack interest, but because retrieving practice weapons afterward is simply too expensive. Yet situations like this don't always follow logical calculations. When organizations feel cornered, decisions can be driven more by urgency than by probability. What professionals might view as impossible can sometimes appear to others as a rare opportunity. And the Caribbean Sea is far from an empty stretch of water. Outside the Taiwan Strait, it is one of the most closely monitored bodies of ocean on Earth. Beneath its surface lies the Sound Surveillance System, often called SOSUS. A network of underwater listening stations originally built during the Cold War to detect Soviet submarines approaching the United States. For decades, those systems have been continuously improved. They can detect whale migrations, shrimp colonies snapping their claws, and the shifting layers where warm and cold water meet deep below the surface. And they can certainly detect a Type 209 submarine running diesel engines designed long before the digital age. When the Sabalo left La Guaira 4 days earlier, its acoustic signature was logged by 17 different sensor arrays before it had even traveled 50 meters. American analysts knew the crew list, the submarine's fuel load, the captain's identity, and even personal details about his family. They knew the vessel's endurance limits, the maintenance issues aboard, and which systems were prone to overheating. To the Venezuelan crew, they were silent figures moving unseen through dark water. In reality, they were being observed the entire time. At 4:18, the torpedo tube flooding sequence began. Seawater rushed into the forward compartment, producing a distinct hydraulic sound. In water, sound travels about 4 times faster than it does through air, spreading outward at roughly 1,500 meters per second. To the crew inside the submarine, it sounded like preparation. To sonar operators aboard the USS Mississippi, it sounded like a signal. Detection took less than 5 seconds. The submarine's BQQ-10 sonar system classified the acoustic pattern almost immediately. The Mississippi itself was operating silently at a depth of around 400 feet, producing so little noise that marine researchers have occasionally recorded whales accidentally bumping into vessels of this class. Within 30 seconds, weapon solutions were calculated for 2 Mark 48 torpedo systems. All that remained was the order. By the time the Venezuelan captain's hand moved toward the firing trigger, the Mississippi had already locked onto the Sabalo's engine room from roughly 2,000 yards away. close enough to hear pumps cycling, close enough to measure propeller revolutions. At that distance, a torpedo's travel time would be counted in seconds. The Venezuelan weapon aboard the Sabalo also revealed much about the situation. It was an SST-4 heavy torpedo, introduced in the early 1970s. At the time, it was considered advanced, wire-guided, capable of around 23 knots, carrying a 260-kilogram warhead designed to threaten large warships. Half a century later, it is essentially a historical artifact still in service. Its guidance wire is copper and can snap if the submarine maneuvers too sharply. Thermal layers in the ocean can interfere with its sensors. Its terminal guidance relies on sonar technology developed decades ago. Modern torpedoes tell a different story. The Mark 48, used by U.S. submarines, travels more than twice as fast, uses fiber optic guidance that resists breakage, and can track targets independently with highly advanced onboard processing. It can navigate through temperature layers in the ocean with ease. The difference between the two technologies isn't measured in a few years. It spans multiple generations. Yet one important fact remains. A 260-kilogram warhead exploding beneath a large ship can still cause severe damage. Age alone doesn't make a weapon harmless, but it does mean the people launching it may never witness the outcome. The USS Gerald R. Ford never travels by itself. Its protection begins long before the ship is visible on the horizon. Virginia-class submarines patrol ahead of the carrier group, creating an underwater detection screen that can identify submerged contacts hundreds of miles away. Above the surface, Boeing P-8 Poseidon aircraft fly search patterns, dropping networks of sonar buoys that listen across thousands of square miles of ocean. Each buoy sends real-time acoustic data back to Fleet Command. Around the carrier itself, Arleigh Burke-class destroyer ships maintain a protective ring. Their hull-mounted sonar systems actively scan the surrounding water, while long-towed arrays trail behind them like electronic fishing lines capable of detecting submarines at remarkable distances. By the time the Sabalo reached firing range, it had already been part of a story that others were quietly observing from the very beginning. Capable of detecting the moment a torpedo launches, sometimes even before it fully clears the tube. High above, circling calmly at 30,000 feet, a Boeing P-8 Poseidon acts as the brain of the entire network. Its AN/APY-10 radar scans every surface contact within roughly 150 miles, while its sonobuoy receivers process acoustic data from dozens of underwater sensors at the same time. Inside the aircraft, operators sit in a quiet, climate-controlled cabin watching high-resolution displays. On those screens, the Sabalo's movements appear clearly, sometimes even before the submarine's own navigator records them. This is layered defense in its purest form. Multiple rings of detection spread across the ocean. Each layer supports the others. Each system feeds information into the next. To reach its target, the Venezuelan submarine would have needed to pass through every one of those layers unnoticed. Doing that with 1970s technology against modern surveillance systems is about as realistic as trying to slip through airport security with an invisibility cloak made of aluminum foil. Through his periscope, the Venezuelan captain saw only one target: the USS Gerald R. Ford. What he couldn't see was the real picture. 3 American submarines, 2 destroyers, 4 aircraft, nearly 20 sonar buoys drifting in the water, all watching, all waiting, all ready. The mathematics of modern naval warfare is surprisingly simple. You cannot strike what you cannot reach, and reaching something becomes nearly impossible when it is watching you from several directions at once. 4:22. The moment arrived. The Venezuelan captain gave the order, Fuego. An SST-4 torpedo left tube 1, a copper guidance wire trailing behind it like a leash behind a sprinting dog. Its speed, 23 knots. Its target, roughly 18 miles away. The response from the Americans was immediate, but not what anyone expected. No torpedoes launched, no explosions beneath the waves. Instead, the USS Mississippi made a far more powerful statement. It activated active sonar at close range. One single ping. The sound echoed through the water like a hammer strike, reverberating through every compartment of the Sabalo. Loud enough that every sailor on board understood instantly what it meant. If the United States had wanted to destroy the submarine, it could have happened already. That one sonar pulse delivered a message more clearly than any diplomatic statement ever could. We see you. We've been tracking you for days. Our weapons are already locked. You're still here because we allow it. The Venezuelan captain understood immediately. His torpedo was already running, 18 minutes from reaching its destination. But now his submarine had been revealed by a hunter he had never detected. Somewhere behind him in the darkness, American torpedoes were almost certainly aimed directly at his hull. He had two options: continue the attack and lose his submarine within moments, or stop. The guidance wire was cut. The SST-4 torpedo, suddenly blind, began its automated search pattern, circling, scanning, trying to find a target. But its aging sensors struggled with the complex temperature layers of the Caribbean Sea. After 11 minutes, its fuel ran out. The weapon slowly sank into the depths, a $1.2 million piece of Cold War technology settling quietly onto the seafloor. At 4:38, the Sabalo surfaced. 64 Venezuelan sailors stepped onto the weathered deck and looked across an empty horizon. No American ships were visible, no aircraft overhead, just open ocean stretching endlessly in every direction. But they all understood what had happened. They had been observed the entire time. The numbers told their own story. Venezuela had expended one SST-4 torpedo worth about $1.2 million. Including fuel, deployment, and crew operations, the total mission cost likely reached around $3.4 million. The United States response required exactly one sonar pulse. Estimated electricity cost, roughly $47. The Virginia-class submarine that ended the encounter never fired a weapon. It never revealed its precise location. It never placed a single sailor at risk. It never even needed to accelerate beyond patrol speed. This is the kind of calculation that defines modern naval strategy. A submarine costing roughly $2 billion to build and tens of millions per year to operate neutralized a decades-old threat using nothing more than a sound wave. But the most important calculation wasn't financial. It was strategic. Destroying the Sabalo would have created a serious international crisis. 64 casualties, diplomatic tensions, political fallout involving every country connected to Venezuela's military supply chain. It also would have handed Caracas something extremely valuable: a dramatic story, global attention, and a powerful narrative to use for years. Allowing the submarine to surface peacefully achieved the same strategic result without any of those consequences. The Venezuelan Navy had been exposed. Its submarine capabilities were shown to be ineffective against modern detection networks. And every other observer around the world received the same message, delivered through a single sonar pulse. We see you before you see us. We track you before you deploy. You'll always get one chance to make the smart decision. After that, the equation changes. The Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group continued its patrol as if nothing unusual had happened. The Sabalo returned to La Guaira, its captain facing intense questioning, its crew fully aware they had been completely outmatched by an adversary they never once saw. In Caracas, military planners studied the reports and faced a difficult realization. Much of their naval strategy had been built on assumptions that were decades out of date. Their submarines were not invisible, their torpedoes were not unstoppable, and geography alone was not protection. In the Caribbean, control belongs to whoever controls the information. And in this case, the information belonged elsewhere. This is what modern deterrence often looks like when no one is paying attention. Not explosions, not headlines. Just a single sonar ping that says everything words cannot. We know where you are. We know what you're planning. You can go home this time. Just don't make us rethink that decision. If you found this breakdown interesting, consider subscribing and sharing the video. Sometimes the stories that never reach the headlines reveal the most about how the world really works.